Hey, what do you think you're doing? That night, I was scowled at by Emily, the stunning department head who had graduated from Kyoto University. We were throwing Emily a welcoming party. We were having a good time drinking and asking each other different things. However, Emily became rather inebriated as the alcohol took effect, exposing her whole skirt. I thus made the decision to cover her with a hand towel that I had on hand. However, Emily tripped and touched my hand since she was drunk and shaky. She apparently mistook it for harassment. You're the worst, Jacob. You shouldn't utilize this just because you're not well liked in your personal life. To be honest, I was taken aback. I had tried to assist her, but it had failed miserably. But there was nothing I could do about it now. I was on the verge of giving up and apologizing when I realized an incredible reality. Jacob is my name. My age is 32. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and my father was an average office worker. Everything I desired was mine, and I was free to do as I pleased. I consider my upbringing to have been really privileged, and I never had to worry about food. But something was still lacking from my existence. I never had reliable siblings. It hurt to see my friends contentedly interacting with their siblings. They always appeared to be enjoying themselves while playing together, and they would always stand by one another as a team. I was really envious of their willingness to support one another, even when it came to schoolwork. I could never have that dream because I was an only kid. Despite my repeated pleas to my parents, my request was never fulfilled. A new family then moved in next door one day. There were 4 people in the family: a mother, a father, a son who was 5 years my senior, and a daughter who was my age. The 4 of them came over to introduce themselves on the day they moved in. I met Tristan, the boy, for the first time then. Tristan and I quickly grew close to one another. We were playing together all the time before I realized it. Hey, did you finish your homework? You can't play until you've done it. I'll help you with it. Tristan always looked after me. Rather than just a friend, he felt more like an older brother to me who had always wished for a sibling. It felt like a gift from the heavens. On weekends, I would stay over at Tristan's house almost every week. We'd play games and talk about all sorts of things. Being with Tristan became so natural that I never imagined it would change. Then one day, I heard something shocking from my mother. As usual, I went to Tristan's house to play, but neither he nor his parents were there. Feeling confused, I went back home and asked my mother. She hesitated for a moment before finally telling me the truth about Tristan. He got sick and is in the hospital now. What? Tristan is sick? Hearing my mother's words, I felt my blood drain from my face. At the same time, I couldn't believe it. There was no way this could be true. Just yesterday, we were having so much fun playing together, so there was no way he could suddenly be hospitalized. But my mother had a serious expression on her face. Maybe it was true. Realizing that, I quickly got ready to leave and said to my mother, "Mom, let's go visit Tristan right away." However, my mother didn't move at all, even after hearing my words. Instead, she gently patted my head. "Jacob, Tristan just had surgery. I know you're worried about him, but let's wait a little while until he recovers, and then we'll go visit him together." I desperately wanted to see him, but if he had just undergone surgery, he was probably exhausted. Understanding that, I decided to listen to my mother. A few days later, my mother and I headed to the hospital to visit Tristan. On the way, my mother said something that caught my attention. "You know, Tristan is fighting an illness right now, so he might seem a little different than usual. But don't worry, okay?" I didn't understand why she would say something like that at that moment, but when we arrived at Tristan's hospital room, I rushed inside without hesitation. The moment I saw him, I was shocked. Lying there was a Tristan who had become so thin that he barely resembled his former self. He wasn't asleep, but his eyes were closed, and he remained still. I hesitantly called out to him, "Tristan." Upon hearing my voice, Tristan slowly opened his eyes and looked at me. He seemed a little surprised at first, but then he smiled happily. "You came. I'm so glad." His voice was weak, lacking its usual energy. Wanting to cheer him up, I handed him something. "Here, I want you to have this card." Tristan reached out with his frail arm and took the card from me. "Oh, this is one of the cards I was collecting, and it's a rare one too." His eyes lit up with joy. "I'm glad you like it, Tristan. You have to get better soon. I'd be really lonely without you. Please come back home quickly." "Of course, I'll recover in no time, just for you, Jacob. Just wait for me." Tristan said that with so much determination, but that ended up being the last time I saw him full of life. One day, after returning home from school as usual, I found my parents with red, swollen eyes. I didn't understand why they looked so down. When they said we were going to see Tristan, I eagerly decided to go with them. We headed next door to Tristan's house. Had he been discharged from the hospital? I felt an unsettling anxiety in my chest. When we entered their home, I saw it. Tristan was lying there, his body already cold. My worst fear had come true. At that moment, I realized that Tristan had left for heaven. Tears streamed down my face, unstoppable. "Tristan, why? You promised we'd play together again." Hearing my cries, Tristan's parents broke into tears as well. His little sister was sobbing loudly beside them. "Jacob, thank you for everything. Tristan asked me to give this to you if anything ever happened to him." His mother handed me a large box. I recognized it immediately. It was the box Tristan always carried when we played card games. When I opened it, I found all of Tristan's most treasured cards inside. I burst into tears, and those tears didn't stop for a long time. After Tristan's funeral, his parents decided to sell their house next door. They told me they couldn't bear to live in a home filled with memories of Tristan. Later, I learned that Tristan's illness was something modern medicine couldn't cure. At the time, I thought that if medical advancements continued, people suffering from the same disease might be saved. That realization pushed me toward the path of medicine. From that moment on, it was as if I had been possessed. I threw myself into studying. My parents were surprised at my sudden change, but they supported me with all their might. By the time I entered high school, I had risen to the top of my class. People even started saying that if I continued on this path, getting into a prestigious medical school wouldn't just be a dream. My parents were overjoyed to see the results of my hard work. One day, I saw a television special about a new drug that was said to be effective for Tristan's disease. However, it would take time for it to be approved and released to the public. The person being interviewed was Mr. Manning, the CEO of S Pharmaceuticals. "If this drug is officially released, this disease will no longer be considered incurable. Our company is committed to advancing its development so that we can help those suffering from this illness." His words captivated me. Until then, I had only thought about becoming a doctor, but at that moment, I realized that there were many different roles in the medical field. Most of all, Mr. Manning's mission aligned with mine. That was the moment I decided that I wanted to join S Pharmaceuticals and help save lives. From then on, I focused entirely on my goal. After 6 intense years in a pharmaceutical science program, I successfully landed a job at S Pharmaceuticals. I didn't choose a research position. I specifically requested to work in sales. I knew that even if a good drug existed, if hospitals didn't fully understand its benefits, the people who truly needed it might not receive it. That's why I wanted to be the kind of salesperson who could properly communicate essential medical information to doctors and pharmacists. By the time I joined the company, the drug that could have saved Tristan had finally been approved and was slowly being used to help patients in need. But spreading awareness of the drug required strong sales efforts. I wanted to make sure it reached people all over Japan to become a beacon of hope for as many patients as possible. With that determination in mind, I arrived at my first day of work. When I stepped into the office, my senior colleagues were already busy with their tasks. Not knowing what to do, I stood frozen until one of my senior colleagues, Haley, approached me. She showed me where to put my things and led me to my desk. First days are always nerve-wracking, but don't worry. Everyone here is kind. If you're ever unsure about anything, just ask. Haley, who was 3 years older than me, said with a gentle smile. For my first business visit to a hospital, Haley was assigned to accompany me. I had memorized all the materials the day before and faced this business meeting with full preparation. I had prepared as much as I could, so there was no way I would fail. But unfortunately, the result was a complete disaster. Haley, however, encouraged me. Everyone struggles at first. You'll get the hang of it, so don't worry. Even so, I knew I couldn't stay like this. Determined to improve, I dedicated myself to studying both medicine and sales techniques. It was, without a doubt, the most grueling period of study in my life. Years passed, and before I knew it, I was 32 years old. Time flew by so fast, it was almost terrifying. I had grown so much since my rookie days. Now I was even training new employees. Compared to my past self, I was almost unrecognizable in terms of skill and speed. You've come such a long way. I can't believe you're outperforming me in sales now, Haley said with a laugh. Thanks to my hard work, I had even been awarded the top salesperson in the department. The thought that my efforts were directly helping patients made me genuinely happy. Then one morning, when I arrived at the office as usual, I noticed that the place was unusually noisy. When I asked Haley what was going on, she whispered something astonishing to me. Hey, remember how Henry, our department head, retired recently? Well, his replacement is starting today. Everyone's been guessing what kind of old guy it'll be for fun. Ah, so that's what all the commotion was about. I decided to join in on the gossip, curious myself. I bet it's going to be some older guy who's worked in a bunch of different departments. Hopefully, he's a kind person. I think he'll be someone really sharp. The head of the sales department is one of the most crucial positions in this company. I doubt they'll bring in someone gentle, but who knows? Everyone was eager to find out who the new department head would be. When the workday officially started, the chatter stopped as everyone returned to their desks. Then it happened. The office door swung open forcefully, and a stunning woman with long black hair and perfect makeup walked in. My colleagues stared at her, unsure of who she was. Right behind her, Mr. Manning entered the room and then made a shocking announcement. Everyone, listen up. This is Emily, your new department head. She's been working as a researcher for years, but she's been chosen for this leadership position. Since she has a strong background in research, she knows these drugs inside and out. If you have any questions, go to her. My colleagues exchanged bewildered glances. No one had expected someone so young and beautiful to become our department head. Mr. Manning continued introducing her despite our stunned silence. Emily graduated from the prestigious Kyoto University's pharmaceutical department. Oh, and she loves drinking, so make sure you invite her out for drinks. His light-hearted remark made my colleagues chuckle, but Emily remained expressionless. Then she spoke in a firm tone. I'm serious about this job, so I expect all of you to follow my lead. With that, she walked to her desk and immediately started working. The atmosphere in the office took a sharp turn for the worse. What was once a lively and friendly workplace suddenly became oppressively silent. No one dared to speak. I could tell that people were intimidated by Emily. She didn't seem like a bad person, and I hadn't talked to her enough to judge, but I wanted to believe she was a good leader. However, it turned out I was being naive. The moment Mr. Manning left the office, Emily suddenly raised her voice. Haley, what is this report? This is unacceptable. Redo it. Haley, startled by the sudden outburst, quickly rushed over to Emily's desk. I wrote it the way I always do. This is the standard format. Haley looked unconvinced. Seeing her expression, Emily glared at her. I'm telling you that method is wrong. Redo it. Everything I say is correct, so just do as I tell you. When the boss gives an order, you obey. Frustrated but without a choice, Haley returned to her desk and began reworking the report. Then Emily called my name in a loud voice. Jacob, what's the status of the hospital sales visit? Yes, I was planning to go today or tomorrow. At my response, Emily looked at me like I just said something ridiculous. She let out an exaggerated sigh. There are patients in that hospital who need this drug right now. Why haven't you gone already? Are you incompetent? Get there immediately. Yes. I quickly gathered my things and rushed out of the office. Technically, what she was saying wasn't wrong, but I had my own pace and strategy for approaching clients. I didn't want the newly arrived department head to interfere with this. On top of that, I couldn't believe she was speaking in such a condescending way. A few hours later, after finishing my sales visit, I returned to the office. But as I reached for the door, I noticed something unusual. The office was unusually loud. The voices inside were so loud they could be heard from the hallway. What is going on? As I stepped into the office, I was met with the loud, angry voices of Emily and Haley echoing through the room. I have to go pick up my child from daycare. I need to leave. Now, I don't need an excuse like that. Finish your work before you leave. Using your child as an escape is something only losers do. If you can't follow my orders, then quit. There are plenty of people who can replace you. Their argument was escalating quickly. The entire office was holding their breath, watching the confrontation unfold. Haley had been working reduced hours ever since she had her child. That was her legal right as an employee, but Emily was blatantly disregarding that and trying to force her to stay. This wasn't right. Thinking that, I said this to Emily. Haley has to pick up her child. I'll take care of her work instead. Emily let out a loud, annoyed tisk. A parent who can't balance work and child care is a failure as an employee. Jacob, make sure you handle it properly. With that, she went silent and returned to her work. Haley thanked me multiple times before rushing out of the office. Being dedicated to work is a great quality, but a leader also needs to consider their employees. I couldn't help but think that later that night, I got a call from Haley. Thank you so much for today. You really saved me. I'm single and have nothing better to do, so don't worry about it. At that, Haley let out a deep sigh. Why does Emily have to be so condescending? Just because she's the department head, does she really think she can act like that? I just don't understand her mindset. Haley seemed to have a lot of complaints about Emily. However, I felt that Emily's attitude was enough to upset everyone. One day, a colleague approached me with a surprising suggestion. We're planning to throw a welcome party for Emily tonight. You're coming too, right? Honestly, I hesitated. If Emily was the guest of honor, everyone would probably be too tense to enjoy themselves. We were already exhausted from work, so why add more stress? Sensing my reluctance, my colleague pleaded, "This department used to be a great place to work. Ever since Emily arrived, it's felt like we're in a war zone. We just want things to go back to how they were. That's why we're doing this." My colleague spoke to me with a deep sense of urgency. I strongly agreed with their opinion, so I decided to attend Emily's welcome party. Of course, my colleague invited Emily as well. Well, my workload is manageable, so I suppose I could grace you all with my presence. Her response was unbelievably arrogant, but at least she agreed to come. During lunch, I also invited Haley. Since that incident, she had been actively avoiding Emily. I thought that if they had time to talk, they might be able to reconcile. After explaining my reasoning, Haley reluctantly agreed, saying she would drop her child off with her husband before coming. Now all that was left was to wait for the party. At the end of the workday, everyone started heading to the bar for the party. I wanted to go right away too, but unfortunately, I had a backlog of work to finish. Emily, however, had no such delays. She packed up and left for the bar alone. For a moment, I thought I saw a small smile on her face. An hour later, I finally arrived at the venue. I walked over to where my colleagues were seated, and there, laughing and chatting with everyone, was Emily. I was shocked when I saw Emily. She wasn't the usual expressionless, work-focused woman I knew. Instead, she was happily chatting and laughing with everyone. Haley noticed me and waved me over to the seat next to her. We're playing a game, and Emily is hosting a quiz, but her questions are so hard that no one can solve them, she said as she sipped her drink. I ordered a beer and clinked glasses with Haley. Just then, Emily, who had been sitting at a distant table, suddenly approached me and held up her glass. "Jacob, cheers." I was stunned. Emily was being friendly. That was new. She was definitely a little tipsy. Haley, sitting next to me, looked just as surprised, her eyes wide with disbelief. As I stood there in shock, one of my colleagues asked Emily a bold question. "Hey, Emily, do you have a boyfriend?" Emily paused for a moment before replying, "Yes, I do. He's someone very important to me." The bar erupted with excited chatter. Everyone was curious about what kind of person would be dating such a beautiful and successful woman. "Do you have a picture of him? We'd love to see." Encouraged by the crowd, people started pressing Emily for details. But instead of answering, she smirked and threw out another impossible quiz question. "If you can solve this problem, I'll show you a picture of my boyfriend." Everyone groaned. The question was a ridiculously complex factorization problem. Basically, a math nightmare. "Hey, Jacob, you're good at math, right? You can solve this, can't you?" She nudged me teasingly. There was no way I could back down now. With everyone watching, I picked up a pen and started solving the problem. I finished solving it in just a few minutes and stood up to show my answers to Emily. And that's when I saw something I shouldn't have. Emily, having had a bit too much to drink, was sitting in a way that made her skirt completely ride up. Luckily, it seemed like I was the only one who had noticed. I quickly grabbed a hand towel from the table and tried to discreetly cover her. But at that moment, Emily, unsteady from the alcohol, stumbled and brushed against my hand. Then her voice rang out loudly right in my ear. She was glaring at me. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" It looked like she thought I had done something inappropriate. I tried to explain, but before I could, she raised her voice again. "Jacob, you're the worst. Just because you're unpopular doesn't mean you can go around harassing people." I had acted with Emily's best interests in mind, so I was disappointed that things turned out this way. But there was nothing I could do. Emily wasn't even willing to hear me out. I figured there was no point in arguing. I might as well just leave. The once lively atmosphere of the party had turned ice cold, all because of me. But then Haley suddenly raised her voice. "Emily, Jacob was just trying to cover you up because your skirt was completely exposed. Calling him a creep is way too harsh." "What?" "My skirt was." It was only then that Emily realized her skirt was completely visible. Haley went on to explain that she had noticed it earlier but wasn't sure how to handle it until I stepped in to help. With that, my innocence was finally proven. Emily apologized to me with a guilty look. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry, Jacob. You were trying to help me." The once cheerful atmosphere had become heavy with tension, and an awkward silence filled the air. To break the mood, I decided to show Emily the answer to her incredibly difficult math problem. As soon as she saw my answer, her eyes widened in surprise. "Jacob, that's correct." Hearing this, my colleagues cheered, and the mood lightened again. "All right then, as promised, you have to show us a picture of your boyfriend." Everyone was buzzing with excitement. Emily hesitated for a moment, then pulled out a photo from her phone's cover pocket and held it up for us to see. The picture looked old and worn around the edges, clearly taken years ago. As I looked at it, my heart skipped a beat. My colleagues, still excited, pressed Emily with questions. Wait, is this a childhood picture of your boyfriend? Which one is him? This is me, and this person here is the most important person in my life. Everyone stared at the image, trying to make sense of her words. Then one of my colleagues spoke up. He kind of looks like you. Emily smiled and finally revealed the truth. Of course he does, because he was my older brother. A heavy silence fell over our table. Everyone exchanged stunned glances. Wait, so when you said you're the most important person and your boyfriend, you were talking about your brother? The awkwardness in the air was undeniable. But then Emily suddenly let out a small laugh. You're all thinking weird things, aren't you? Don't worry, my brother has already passed away, but I loved him so much. My colleagues looked at her with expressions of surprise and sympathy. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Emily, your brother was Tristan. At my words, Emily looked like she was about to collapse from shock. Why do you know my brother's name? I pointed at the person in the corner of a photo that Emily showed me. Do you recognize this kid? Emily's face changed completely. No way. Are you saying you're the boy my brother was closest to back then? You still think about my brother? Tears welled up in her eyes. Of course I do. Tristan was more than just a friend. He was family to me. There's no way I'd forget him. I chose this career path because of him. Hearing this, Emily suddenly broke down, sobbing loudly in front of everyone. Her cries echoed through the bar. My colleagues were completely taken aback. Emily, who had always been so strict and composed, was now crying like a lost child. Haley, moved by the scene, gently handed her a handkerchief. I couldn't save my brother. That regret has haunted me my entire life. That's why I pursued this career. I'd wanted to help people suffering from the same illness that took him away. That's the only reason I pushed myself so hard all these years. Hearing Emily's heartfelt confession, my colleague's eyes glistened with unshed tears. So the reason you were so strict with us was because you wanted to help patients struggling with illness. Yes, I just wanted to save as many lives as possible. It was my way of making up for not being able to save my brother. But I realize now I forced my ideals onto all of you. I'm truly sorry. When Emily said that, Haley shook her head. Emily, your passion has reached us loud and clear. Your desire to help as many people as possible through medicine is truly admirable. Somewhere along the way, I think I forgot why I chose this job in the first place. Thank you for reminding me. Tears rolled down Haley's cheeks. She was so overwhelmed with emotion that she couldn't say anything more. My colleagues sat quietly, absorbing everything. It was an unexpected and shocking revelation, but because of it, Emily was finally able to connect with everyone. I deeply felt that I was truly glad to have attended the welcome party. The welcome party continued to be lively, and everyone seemed to be having a great time. However, the last train's departure time was approaching. Reluctantly, everyone started preparing to leave. At that moment, Emily quietly took my hand, making sure no one noticed, and whispered in my ear, "Jacob, let's be alone together." I couldn't help but blush. I had no idea what Emily meant by that. Seeing my reaction, Emily chuckled. "What are you imagining? I just want to talk about my brother." So that's what she meant. I felt embarrassed for even thinking otherwise, even for a second. Emily must have seen right through me, and my face felt like it was on fire. Quickly, I responded, "Of course, I'd love to talk about Tristan." Emily smiled, looking pleased. After everyone had left, Emily and I happened to be heading in the same direction, so we decided to chat while waiting for the last train. Then Emily told me something completely unexpected. My brother, he passed away in a hospital bed, but he kept saying he wanted to be discharged. We thought he meant he wanted to go home and be with family, but the first thing he said was that he wanted to hang out with you. My parents and I were honestly a bit disappointed at the time. It's funny to think about now, though. That was the first time I had ever heard that. Then Emily handed me something. I always cared. This is a keepsake of my brother, but I think you're the one who should have it. It was a photo of Tristan and me, both grinning from ear to ear. The moment I saw it, I couldn't stop my tears. Emily, sitting beside me, started crying too. We didn't care about the people around us and just kept crying together. The vibe in the office drastically shifted after that. Emily remained rigid as ever, but her coworkers' attitudes toward her had changed as a result of the welcoming celebration. Are you even trying, Haley? What is the intended purpose of this report? Oh, I was going to fix that just now. Do not be concerned. If you noticed it, then fix it faster. I took Emily's scathing comments rather well. The other coworkers had begun to react similarly to her. They appeared to have finally felt Emily's enthusiasm. For my part, Emily and I grew close, even if our formal relationship